I'm really grateful to the three of you for such a fantastic overview. And in fact, the order of discussion with you coming in, Simon, showing some very real examples of how you're grappling with narrative ideas and then turning that into practice is very, very inspiring. But could I invite everyone in the group to think about some questions? But in the meantime, I wonder if Chris, Louise, or Simon, if you have any questions for each other. Otherwise, I can start off because I've got many burning questions, but I can certainly ask one to all of you, which I might start with. So Simon's just put his musicforawarmingworld.org website in there. And remember, Nina is all about plugging your own work, showing off all the good things your organisation are doing, and then joining up with others. So that's why Nina's so much fun. You don't have to pretend that you don't do the things you do. You tell everyone what you're doing and then they'll tell you what they're doing. And that's the whole point of it. So, but look, my question to the three of you, just for an initial kickoff, is in terms of the work that the New Economy Network is doing, as Chris well knows, I'm quite passionate about playing a part in really trying to shift the conversations into all the good directions that we're finding. But I'm continually troubled by the control of the press, by the Murdoch press for mass media, the decline in local and regional newspapers, which for whether you want to argue some of them were controlled anyway. But my question to you guys is, what do you think are some of the best ways that a group like Nina or anyone else can reach out with communication pathways, strategies to enlarge its networks and to enlarge the messaging to people that might not spend their every waking moment thinking about saving the world? What do you think? Chris?
That's a tough question. The Coalition of Everyone did a really interesting project this year, which I had a little bit of involvement with, called the Future Now Project, collecting people's visions of what they would like the future of Australia to look like and putting those up on a web platform. And while I think, and this goes a little bit to the, Karen asked me a question in the chat as well. So this goes a little bit to that as well. I think so far those, what I've looked at in my work is people that are already passionate about creating this transformation and the kind of narratives that they're talking about. And so far, most of the people that have posted visions on the Future Now Project's website are also those kind of people. They're the already converted. And so, but the ambition of that project is to reach out much more broadly and hear the visions of people from all walks of life in Australia. And so I think rather than trying to think of it as what's the message that we want to communicate, it's more of a listening approach where I think the suspicion that we had in that project was that if you ask people what they want for the future, there'll be a lot of common ground across both sides of politics, across different demographics. And we thought, you could go and you could ask people in a surf lifesaving club, here's a little visioning project you could do in your club, a little process you could do and post the vision that you come up with and start to collect those visions and then draw out some of the common ground that we see emerging across. So I guess those are pretty unformed thoughts, but I think an approach that draws out what people are looking for the future first, rather than saying, hey, the future should look like this, get on board, may be a better way to reach out to expand the networks of people getting involved in this conversation.
Sure, and I should have stressed that it wasn't about, I guess it was more about inviting people into the network or inviting people into these bigger discussions and events, the framing of some of that for folks who aren't already engaged. I mean, the listening, obviously, I agree, it's very important. But thank you for that answer. Louise or Simon, did you have any thoughts about that? How we reach folks who maybe aren't already in our networks around?
Look, I don't have a global answer, but some of the work that we're doing at the moment around the public good, I think, speaks to a small pocket of it. And what we've been doing there is going out and talking to as diverse groups as, you know, a women's health organisation or a mothers club or a group of workers in a distribution centre, and trying to have a conversation, and very much with the listening frame that Chris talked about, of what does public good look like for them. And part of, so we're not doing it through mediated channels, so we're not relying on, you know, the Murdoch press or whatever to try and tell people a story, but to try and use natural networks and community-based networks to try and unveil a story. And then in the process of unveiling, it's actually about building new capacity. So the process itself is as important as the end product. And so it's building those networks that then start to create their own agendas and hopefully start to create their own organisation and activity locally, which then somehow we need to then join up. So I don't think that's isolated to Australia Remade. It's, you know, it's a whole range of other organisations doing similar work, but I think there's some core elements about, you know, it's about trying to have people, you know, the big word that's come out of today is participation. People need to be part of the process. And one of the public goods may well be that we identify that we need non-marketised local media sources and that's something that, you know, the public purse should support down the track. So, you know, ultimately you can change the dynamics that make it difficult in the first place.
Yeah, thank you. And certainly anyone who knows the way we've designed NINA, by having our distributed governance, by having these now dozens of hubs around Australia, that's really about participating and making the future, not just receiving a passive message and thinking about it. So thank you. Were there any other questions that the panel or our speakers had for each other? I've got a question here I can jump to otherwise.
I just want to know if Simon can do Australia Remade the musical for us, which was one of the suggestions from a Narrative Hub workshop a couple of months ago.
Sure.
Why don't we integrate it into the New Economy Cabaret? Because I've been planning for the Newcastle one to get like a karaoke version of how people could jump up, and I have 4 songs that I rewrote. They're not originals. I rewrote about the new economy. So let's do that, and Australia Remade and all the other good ones at the next NINA gathering or an online sing-along. Wouldn't that be hilarious? Simon is coming onto the board of directors at NINA, so we can have a special working group on the musical.
Nice.
Okay, so we've got a question here, Stephen Liaros. How do we reconcile the contradiction between asking people what future they want and the Indigenous perspective of listening to the land and developing human stories in relationship with the understanding of the land? How do we develop systems where human stories emerge from the land rather than from individual desires? Green Prince program run by Ayla. Woohoo.
One response to that is how you go about asking people to think about their future and how you draw out in that process connections to place that they feel. And so I have a kind of visualization script that I run people through when I'm trying to bring them into the space of thinking about the future, because it's not an easy space to get into. We're all very stuck in what's going on in the present and the trends that seem hard to break away from. And some of the things that visualization script does, I mean, it's literally like a meditative process. You sort of close your eyes and you go through imagining yourself in this future world, but a lot of it is about trying to encourage people to connect to place through that process and to really try and feel the place that they're imagining themselves in and engage all of their senses. So what are they hearing and smelling and seeing? And so maybe that's one way to kind of bridge that contradiction is starting with what is it that you love about a particular place and then imagining yourself in that place in the future. So, great question, and would love to explore other ways to bridge that.
Thank you. Bronwyn Morgan, who's one of the NINA directors, but also seems she's got some ideas. Did you want to respond to that as well?
Well, yes, I'd love to, because I was, I wanted to speak about this as soon as Simon had spoken. It's basically, I've had this vague idea before, responding to something called singing. Has anyone come across, where is it? Sorry, I've got so many thoughts banging off in my head. Singing from Country. Okay, so it's a Community Music Victoria project, and I don't know if any of the Melbourneites have come across it, but they only had funding for a year, but they went to different places and they met with the elders before they went, and they planned the way, and they basically then held an event, a community event, where they introduced people to the history of the place, led by the elders, and had conversations and did certain things during that day. And then the songwriters wrote a song within a day, and the end of the day was a performance of that song on the stage. And one of my friends helped run it, and he is a songwriter. He said it was very challenging for songwriters to do it that fast, but also incredibly sort of energizing and rewarding. And I remember having a conversation with Michelle about that a few years ago, and saying we should blend that with green prints, which is what she's talking about in the chat. And now I'm thinking, with the musical idea, that you could run a series of those, each of them with sort of aimed at producing one of the songs for the musical, and work with Australia Remade. And I don't know, I just think it connects this idea of the connection to the country, and another way into the Indigenous knowledge and the music.
No, I think it's wonderful, Bronwyn.
Yeah.
Are you able to share a web link in the chat too?
So I've been looking while we've been listening, and I'll keep looking, but it looks like they got funded. They used to have a Facebook group, which I was on, and it's gone. They used to have a web page, and it's gone. And it was a few years ago, and it only had a year's funding. So I can contact my friend and try to see what.
Yeah, please do. Thank you for sharing, Bronwyn. And I ramble about green prints because it's a really nice community-based, local up way of bringing Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples in a bioregion together to do a full process over a year or two of like a bioregional knowledge festival, which we're hosting at the Sunshine Coast next year, which brings our earth arts and other arts collectives together. And we'll be doing the writing of poetry and such with scientists, with Indigenous elders, family-friendly event, but it links to this in-depth analysis of the whole impact over time, different scenarios for the bioregion, and then the long-term economic transition builds out of that. And in all honesty, it's one of the reasons I've spent 4.5 years volunteering my time to build NINA, is so that we had a new economy framework inside a bioregional earth-centered framework for community-based, community-led change. And then right at the end of it, we've got the legal aspects and the governance aspects. And so storytelling in amongst all that is incredibly important, and it already is. People have, and through the processes we've led, people are saying, I had no idea that on the back ridge of my place there were giants. The trees were bigger than my house. Nobody knows this, and so they're starting to tell the stories of what used to be there to awaken knowledge of what the bioregion's really about. So I just mentioned it because it's actually pivotal to the long-term strategies of AILA and NINA, is this bioregional stuff. So but that was very indulgent of me to share. I shouldn't do that. I should be zipped up when I'm a facilitator. Do we have questions specifically for our wonderful speakers tapping into their amazing expertise, please? Oh yeah, well, Bronwyn, if you've got a question for our speakers. You're on mute, mate, you're on mute.
Sorry, just particularly how, because I think this goes, it could be for anyone. It starts with Simon, but it goes to the point of how do you connect to the wider community that's not already thinking about this. And you know, I guess with Simon, when you're writing about earnest-ish subjects, and it sort of made me laugh when you said you were having a tough time with UBI. And I couldn't hear the songs. For some reason, the music didn't play through my device. So how do you deal with earnest political sort of material through music that you're trying to make as popular as possible?
Oh, I don't think there's any straightforward answer to that. I think one of the things that I do is I test the emotional resonance of what I'm singing about. I test it on others. I belong to a number of songwriting groups to see what the response is. Often it's like falls flat, I'll drop it. But it is a challenge, and some of my songs have been, particularly in the show, have been tended to be fairly, in a sense, didactic, in the sense they're telling about science or telling particular stories. But ultimately, you've got to tap into emotions, and I think this is the thing. We can have stories, but we've got to give them an emotional context, where people can then process and sit with that story. And that's one of the reasons I do music, is that it allows an opportunity, or so, I guess the way we have done it with an hour-long show, it gives people a chance to sit with the stories that might be difficult. And look, if you're being a bit, you can't preach. We can say, well, we should eat more vegetables. Try to do it in a fun way, because I think that's what the evidence is showing us. The scientists get up and say, hey, here's the weight of evidence about agricultural reform that needs to take place, and about dietary issues, and about animal welfare, and about industrial animal production, and about about workers' rights in these big industrial systems. There's overwhelming amount of evidence. So we try to give it a bit of a light touch, but something that people can take away as an earworm, without necessarily having to dig into all the stuff behind it. So it's tricky, and I think we have to work hard as songwriters not to slip into that thing of being, I don't know, embarrassingly earnest. Got to break it up a bit. So I don't know what the trick is, but you sort of know it. When you've got it right, you know it. But like doing art, when you get that moment, you've got it. There's no algorithm that shows you what to do. So that's the best I can say.
Following on from that, Simon, and this is a question, not me rattling about myself, have you ever drawn on the inspiration of the remarkable body of work from unions and folk songs, particularly that emerged in the 19th century and the early 20th, as people were, speaking up for their rights as workers, their rights for a future? I was thinking when you were talking about UBI, some of the core aspects have actually all been done. Possibly.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. And I go to we've played a lot of folk festivals, and I've been to many folk festivals over the years, particularly the folky type of festivals. I get frustrated, to be honest, because a lot of it, the stuff is about nostalgia. A lot of the interest in the old songs about mining and even the old union days is all about stuff that's gone in the past. I go, where are the stories for the future? Who's thinking about what this means for workers in the future, or for the environment in the future? There's a lot of stuff around the old days. And part of my goal is to actually raise consciousness about forward thinking, which is tricky, but that's what I've committed to doing.
And a lot of the passion from union songs does generate from the nostalgia, the sadness, the grief of changed circumstance. So tapping into emotion, and even the grief about climate change, surely that will touch a nerve, lamenting for things, but also looking to a future. So thank you so much, Simon. And perhaps to wind us into...
Could I just maybe very quickly,
please.
Sorry, just 2 quick comments, particularly to Bronwyn's question. We had an experience recently where we've just made and released a very short video about a sort of a visioning exercise, and Millie's put the link in the chat. And it was a real struggle between those of us that wanted to have a million words and ideas and graphs, and those that wanted an emotional experience that was essentially visual, oral, and emotive. And I've got to say, what we ended up with was, fortunately, I didn't win, others did, and we got a much better product. But what's fascinating is that people who are experienced campaigners are a bit, it's not bad, whereas a whole lot of other people have really felt and been moved by it. And so, we do need to find different avenues for different groups, but the power of the emotive shouldn't be underestimated, particularly those of us who want to just go to the more cerebral or didactic. So, and can I just say, when I was with the union, we had a song called Standing Together. It was written by a WA songwriter. We had it modernised to our union, and we sang it at the beginning of every big collective union meeting. And it was all about solidarity, essentially. But the act of standing and singing together actually very affirming. Very well.
Yeah. No, I couldn't vehemently confirm that any more vehemently, because I think a lot of the kind of more reserved nature of a lot of our Anglo-Saxon heritage means some folks are uncomfortable singing in a predominantly white fella group. But then I remind them about the Welsh and the Celts and the way that everyone sings all the time in other places. So tapping into that's really great. I was just thinking so much, Louise, I was thinking to lead us out, because we'll close in a moment. I wonder if Chris, Simon and Louise, you could just briefly mention one or two things that you'll be doing next year that will be progressing some of these issues we're talking about. Even if it's one really cool event or a meeting or a campaign, it'd be nice to look to the future as we close. Chris, would you like to go first?
Sure. Well, there's going to be a Nina Narratives Hub update on Sunday. So I don't want to steal the thunder of that too much, but there will be Nina Narrative Hub events. There's another meeting coming up still this year in 10 days' time, if anyone wants to come along. And then we'll be talking there about what we want to focus on next year. And I've got a few ideas. Michelle sent through some ideas. So really, I guess it's thinking about how we can bring some of these narrative and storytelling ideas to Nina's communications, and how we can help through the Nina network start to have some of these messages starting to move out through the network. So that's one thing. I had a go at writing a short story which got published about a more positive view of the future, trying to sort of combat the dystopian imagery that we are so commonly bombarded with. And that was published in a collection called Our Entangled Future, which was about trying to tell more positive stories about how the future might play out. And I'm keen to play around with fiction a little bit more, and trying to walk that line between not being didactic and just letting the world building emerge through the telling of the story. And so I had one go at that. I'm keen to give it a bit more of a go next year as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris. And Louise, did you want to mention something that you're looking for?
Just very briefly, and Millie will be talking on it more later, but we'll be rolling out the sort of next phase expansion of the public good conversations across the country, and all around the notion of trying to extend and create new public squares. So we're pretty excited about that at a sort of a much bigger scale.
Thank you. That's terrific. And Simon?
Well, I'm really looking forward to the narratives one, working with Chris, and because I think it's a really important initiative. We've actually got our first online show, kindly sponsored by the Willoughby City Council in Sydney, coming up this Thursday, live streaming with a Q&A at the end of it, 7 o'clock. So you can access it either through Willoughby City Council or just our website, Music for a Warming World, and just look for the gig tab, and you'll find a link to the booking. You've got to book, but it's free because it's sponsored by the good people of Sydney, or Willoughby at least. And that's part of it. That album is going to be part of a project of a series of music videos around geared telling stories, and a series of written pieces. So some essays that I've already written, and some other pieces that I'm still writing around trying to give both the sort of textual plus the visual plus the sort of emotional dimension to some of these stories. And always looking for collaborators for projects around these themes. So we'd love to hear from anyone who's interested in the role of music. Thanks. Great.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. Thank you to our participants. Just a reminder, we're going to turn the conference off, how funny, for an hour. And we can have a lunch break now. And so it's 12 noon here in Queensland. It's 1 p.m. AEDT. We will be getting back together in an hour. Thanks to everyone for your patience with our internet, with our little website having a giant sleepy moment when everyone tried to use it. I have just sent an email to all conference participants, giving you an alternative page to log into to get all of the conference details for the whole conference. But I also earlier today sent another email to all of you with the actual Zoom links for every single session today. So please do have a look at your emails. If for whatever reason you feel lost, confused, join the club. No, I mean, send us an email and I'll be able to respond to you with the relevant bits. But thank you again to all our speakers. Fabulous air clapping, little clappings on your buttons. I do like the reactions. Clappity clap and party party. Yay. Thanks so much, everybody. And we'll see you in another session soon. Have a great break. See you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.